Auden, good to see you. Thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So here we are. Trump is sworn in, and I was just sharing with you how I guess I got censored yesterday for a post on X where you just listened to it. Did you hear anything bad?
There was nothing that stood out, why or any grounds on why you should be censored. Um, New era. I don't know.
We were talking about Bitcoin for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I don't see what's wrong with Bitcoin and talking about it. Why it should be censored.
So obviously, well, I don't say obviously, but it seems like there's some type of algorithm that scrubbed this, and there was some type of words that the algorithm didn't like. But I mean, we mentioned Trump's name because we were talking about the Trump meme coin, but that was it. Like there was nothing, there wasn't even any profanity in it or anything.
Yeah, that's we'll see what happens with X and the censorship that they're having on there. I know some have been complaining about it, especially when it comes to the whole Palestine and Israel debate. You know, but other than that, I mean, we'll just have to hopefully the algorithm stays as free as possible, and we're able to express ourselves, and especially even with the border, something that I've been covering for the past few years, and hopefully we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, my biggest concern with all this, one, getting back to the free speech for a second, because you talk about the Palestinian Israel, I could see them using as because this is look, as long as technology continues to advance, in my opinion, because you have to say in my opinion for everything,
Hmm.
technology advances, they're just going to tighten the grip. I don't care who's in charge, because I
Yeah.
mean, look at from 20 years ago to today, things are a lot more tighter. After 9/11, they took advantage of that with Homeland Security and TSA and so on and so forth. Patriot Act. And, now, and I've read this, where they could start going after protesters on college campuses that are pro Hamas and use that under the guise to basically take away, to not even basically, to take away your First Amendment right, which is free speech. There's always an agenda behind all these things. And
Yeah, and I think that can be applied to TikTok as well. I think that's the whole argument behind TikTok getting banned, and now that it's back up again. I've seen some posts that now anything that says Palestine, it's getting removed. Um, so I think you're right, and TikTok proves that.
Well, and even as I was hearing Kristi Noem talking about at her confirmation hearing, how they won't use an actual wall. They in all aspects of the wall, it won't be a physical part of it. It'll be digital. And I'm like, yeah, do people really understand what's happening here?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot at play behind the scenes that it still hasn't played out, and we're not being told. There's a few out there that are researching, digging up, and they give us some clues of what's happening or what's to come. But I think we need to stay vigilant. And like we were talking before, with all these tech moguls, getting too close to Trump and what they're pushing, um, we got to stay vigilant.
This to me, Auden, sounds like WEF 2.0. Because they're the one
Yeah,
building.
I think
They're building. Not to interrupt you, but they're building the instruments. They are building the instruments for the digital currency.
yeah, I mean, I think they try to do it through the web, and they realize, what, let's do it through Trump, and they've managed to get close to him, and I think we're going to see some of that playing out. We're already seeing it. I think yesterday's press conference was an indicator of that.
Well, and then casualties of this would be George Soros, Klaus Schwab, everybody on the other side of that would be, because, I believe there was a war going on between elites, and it might
Yeah.
still be going on, but now with them behind MAGA, right, and because the country is behind MAGA, they're behind Trump. Now you can take out Klaus Schwab and Soros
Mm.
and not literally take them out, but that you've got the upper hand now in this.
Yeah.
This is like a
And
movie, man. Auden, this is like a
it
straight up
is.
movie.
It is. I don't think a lot of us are prepared to what's going to come these 4 years under Trump 2.0. I think we voted for one vision, and what's going to play out is completely different.
How do you see this playing out? How do you see this playing out? Before you answer that, how do you see it playing out in relation to what you're doing right now at the border?
So at the border, I know everybody is, for the closed border, secure border, and with the colleagues that went down to the border, reporters, I told them, I said, I'm not seeing what y'all are seeing. I think it's going to be complete chaos because I even said, I was like, it's going to be January 6 times 10. There's going to be a lot of crime in the U.S., especially with the migrants. Those that are here in the U.S. by the millions, they're not going to go to their country of origin freely on their own will. They're going to fight. They already tasted what it's like to be here in the U.S. They're not going to leave. They're going to put up a fight. And if they have to burn down cities to protest, they're going to do it. And I don't think we're prepared for that. I know under Trump, first Trump administration, we had BLM and all these riots. I think we're going to have some of that again this time around, probably with Venezuelan crowds and different nationalities that are protesting the immigration, whether it's the raids, the deportations. I think they're going to put up a fight. They're not going to go freely to their country of origin and get deported.
Do you think that will even occur though? Because I think as more time passes, I just don't see them carrying out some mass deportation. I know there was talk of something that was going to occur in Chicago, but the plans got leaked. I'm cynical and everything. I wonder if this got leaked intentionally. That way it was like, oh, we couldn't do it because, our team was at risk. I just don't see that occurring.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So under Trump, first Trump administration, I think his, build the wall messaging, that was ridiculed and even in Mexico, that Mexico's going to pay for it. That didn't pan out. And to this day, Mexico still ridicule him for that. And I think the same thing is going to happen with the mass deportations. They've set up they set themselves up for failure because, one, they haven't defined that threshold for what's a mass deportation. And I think they're going to get criticized for it if we don't see any mass deportations. These raids, again, who are these raids going to target? It's going to be mainly Mexican nationals that are, that crossed as gotaways and are here illegally without any legal backing, right? But as far as like the Venezuelans, who were the majority that crossed, Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, all those have a legal status. How are you going to raid them and deport them en masse? There's still a lot that has to be played out, and I just don't see those numbers to justify as being a mass deportations that have been promised.
Well, and how can, even if let's just say you take one city, isolate one big city, there's so many people that have gotten into this country. I don't believe the number of 10 million either. I mean, you're down there. What, do you believe that number of 10 million?
I didn't see the 10 million. I saw the thousands. But again, it was all across the border. So the numbers under Biden, there's some estimates that I've seen close to 10 million. So, but again, most of those were granted asylum and they have legal status in the U.S. So the only ones that I see them going after is mainly like Mexican nationals, Guatemalans, also in the Northern Triangle that crossed illegally and are illegally here in the U.S. I think those are just the main ones. And last figures I saw, Mexico had about 10 million Mexican nationals in the U.S. 4 million are illegally. The others have legal status. So again, how do you establish the mass deportations and how do you come up with all those numbers? So I think we could see another opportunity where the administration is setting themselves up for failing, and criticism even from Democrats saying that they didn't meet those numbers, that threshold of mass deportations.
I mean, even 4 million. How much labor would it require in terms of manpower to go out and find those 4 million people?
Exactly. How are you going to do it? You don't have the resources. And one thing that maybe we didn't like it, but the Biden administration laid out an infrastructure. They used NGOs, they used shelters, and they use these programs to get these millions into the U.S. And I think that's the infrastructure that should be laid out first, now in reverse order, to get all these people that are illegally in the country, get them out. Without those resources, I don't see how they're going to do it. I'm skeptical. That's what I'm saying. If they do it, good. But from what I'm seeing, so far, I'm skeptical.
It's people. I don't know if they give you any type of slack for being skeptical on all this, but I try to be objective and be realistic of where we are. And I think you just laid out all the more reason to be objective and realistic because, excuse me, you can't just flip a light switch on here and reverse this.
You can't. I think one of the things that I push for, or that I would talk about, is that you had too many pull factors into the U.S. for the migrants, too many incentives for them to come over. And the biggest one was that the border was wide open and asylum was being granted, or CBP-1 appointments were being granted. And so now that you have all these people in the U.S., I think now the whole process needs to be reversed, where you shut down those incentives, and now you implement push factors where they're going to be pushed out of the country by themselves. And it could be either with the E-Verify, where you need a Social Security to go work. Of course, cut off all the benefits, the social programs that they had for illegals, and eventually, they won't be able to find a way to live here in the U.S. where they're going to say, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going back to my country. And I was here in West Texas, where I'm at. There's a large community of Venezuelans and Cubans. I've spoken to Cubans, and they've given me their pros and cons of capitalism versus communism, a system that they're used to living. And it says, yeah, there's some good parts to it, but overall they don't like it because they have to work for it. And some of them have opted to go back to Cuba. I said, no, I prefer communism over capitalism. And that's exactly those push factors that I'm referring to. When they realize that you have to work for, to be here in the U.S., and a lot of them are going to say, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to go back.
So are you seeing now people that are going back?
There's a handful, some that I've spoken to, not en masse, but again, because they didn't like the system of capitalism, where they had to work and that, there's no free handouts, something that they were used to under communism. But what I'm saying is, if you make it harder for the vast majority of them, they won't have an option but to say, you know what, this American dream is a nightmare. I'm going back.
Or the other thing they can do, Auden, is create a digital ID. The illegals can't get the digital ID. Now we're stuck.
Well, that's another one that, I see where we're leading to.
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. To some extent, you're going to have something in place where you identify, who's who, and filter out those that shouldn't be here, and eventually, either deport them, or they'll self-deport, one of the two, or they'll just live, in the dark, like many do.
Doesn't sound that bad, man. Maybe we need to go live in the dark too. What do you get in the dark? You get anything?
Not really. Everything's on the black market.
Oh. I'm not saying I'm going to go live in the dark for people that are, going to push back on me for this. But well, and also, how will you put it in? How will you position a digital ID to where you say, all right, we can get all these illegals out of here, because these mechanisms get put into place when people are either they have no other option in terms of like it's that bad, it's that dire, and this is the best solution for them. So you wonder what could they do to implement a digital ID in order to say, hey, all the illegals they'll be all gone. Because that would get, I mean, they would, a lot of them would, you're right, would just leave.
I would think so. And then I think overall, I mean, I think the big picture is, whether some of these illegals are indeed needed in the U.S. You know, to Democrats' credit, they argue about certain jobs being filled by immigrants, and that's a whole different debate. But assuming that it is true, I think why not implement a program for them where they're vetted and they come and do the job that they're gonna do, and allow them to go back to the country of origin. It's creating another problem, especially I have family. Half of my family, they're Mexican nationals. The other half were U.S. citizens, and I'll have to admit, those that are Mexican nationals, and this is where I see it, and it's not just my family. It's a lot of families here in Texas, where the husband decided to come over illegally because he has a family. He can't sustain the family in Mexico. So the husband came over. He's working, and because he's here illegally, he can't go back and forth to Mexico. So what does he do? He brings his wife over, and then his kids, and then they have more kids here. And now you have U.S. citizen babies, something that Trump is now, issued an executive order to stop that. But that's been the trend with a lot of Mexican nationals. And I think, and I've spoken to them. It's like, do you miss Mexico? Would you go back? And they're like, absolutely, I miss my family. I would go back if I could. I said, but now I'm stuck here. And I think if these programs were in place, they would come and work and head back to Mexico without bringing their families over. And the other incentive, I think this is the other part that we're missing. We focus so much just on the U.S., but looking at Mexico and how Mexico is leaning left and spiraling out of control with the cartels and crime and violence, another push factor of why a lot of them are coming to the U.S. Those that are here in the U.S. illegally and even some legally, in Mexico, you're either poor or rich. There's no middle class. And I think if there was something in place where Mexican nationals now in the U.S. that have tasted what it's like to be here in the U.S., if they had the opportunity to go back to Mexico, I think they would be a force to change Mexico. They would become the middle class that can change Mexico, and in the right direction. And to me, that's a plus long term. But I don't see anybody talking about it, having that vision long term. Everything's just focused on the U.S. Making America great again. And I think some of these tools, to a larger extent, should be looked at and how to make those other countries safe and secure again, so these people, have a reason to stay in their country and fight for their country instead of all wanting to flee and come to the U.S.
How much of a presence are the cartels here in the United States?
I mean, they have their branches. They've branched out into every major city. And that's just how they network and work. It'd be hard to tell. I'm not an expert in cartels, and I just read other experts, and what they're saying is that they're throughout every community in the United States, and that's another factor of how they've managed to branch out from Mexico into the U.S. Another big issue is the war on drugs and whether it's fentanyl. I mean, you can go back to the 80s when it was marijuana, cocaine, and now it's methamphetamine and fentanyl. I mean, they're just going to keep evolving, and the root cause is not being addressed. So to me, it's just getting worse and worse, and I just don't see anything long-term or permanent that's being put in place. It's just temporary solutions, one of which is like remain in Mexico. To me, that's a temporary solution. It's a revolving door. to say that migrants can remain in Mexico while they apply for their asylum, you're still admitting that they qualify for asylum. So it's still a hope for them to be in Mexico and make it into the U.S. And the reason we're talking about it now is because it was implemented under the first administration, Trump administration, and what did they do? Yeah, they stayed in Mexico and they waited Trump to leave office, and they were the first ones to come under Biden, and that's my whole argument. Are we going to have this back and forth every 4 years? To me, that's not a solution, and I think Congress should act. I know there's congressional hearings happening today. It's time to Congress to act and put in place laws that solve this issue once and for all. That's what needs to be done, instead of executive orders and temporary policies.
Yeah, the executive orders are like hot potatoes, right? It's just boom, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, is that what we're going to have every 4 years? Just back and forth, borders closed, borders open, border closed, borders open.
Well, and also too, the Republicans were never that serious about wanting to close the border, because look at how they did. They didn't do anything in the last 4 years. They had control of Congress, and they didn't do anything.
And that points back to the whole argument of whether we really need migrants to come into the U.S. and work and fill some jobs. And to me, the argument is yes. Otherwise, you would have had Republicans oppose everything that the Biden administration was doing. They would have put a fight. They would have shut down the government. They would have done something if they were really, in favor of it. They didn't do anything. And to me, that proved that they were in favor all along of what was happening.
And even from the drug standpoint, I mean, how much were the private, couriers like the UPSs and the FedExes and the post office, how much were they involved in wanting to stop this?
I don't think nobody was interested in stopping it, because it's business for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I've never heard the CEO of UPS testify on the Hill. I don't even know who it is, but them asking him or her, what are you doing to try to combat the amount of drugs that are going into your packages? I've never seen that. I feel like that would make national news if that was happening.
Yeah, I went down to, I was in Northern California filming a documentary with Jorge Ventura on the illegal marijuana growth.
Was that with John Norris?
Yeah, with John Norris.
Yeah,
exactly. He was there as well.
Yeah, I met up with John in L.A. Last time I was in L.A. It was 2019, November of 2019. I had Jorge on here, too. That was a great documentary.
Yeah, it is. And so we went to the marijuana grows, and we're there with the sheriff. They did some raids, and they're just out in the open. And they were using, some of these were Chinese, and they were using FedEx and UPS. So once the marijuana was processed, they had their packages, and they were shipping throughout the U.S. And they were using U-Haul trucks, UPS, FedEx would, they're delivering throughout the U.S. So, like you said, they're not going to complain about, what packages are being delivered or what's in those packages. It's business for them.
No, and then you go to those local town hall meetings, and these people were they were hostages, and they couldn't get any city officials or county officials to not only not to help them, but not even to listen. They didn't even want to hear it.
They didn't. Everybody's getting their cut. Officials, but they're getting bribed, or they're part of it, and everybody's making money, whether it's with the drugs, with the human smuggling. I think everybody except for the media is making money.
What is life like in Mexico right now? When was the last time you were there?
So it's been several months, about 6 months since I'm in there. So where I go in the state of Coahuila, it's relatively peaceful. There's no open cartel in that state. That was the one state that was very attractive for migrants because of that one reason, that there's no cartels. And that's what they would cross there in Eagle Pass and Del Rio. But any other state, there's infighting between cartels, especially down in central Mexico, southern Mexico. Cartels made their way into Chiapas, fighting over the high-priced migrants like the Chinese and others that were paying thousands of dollars. When I went down to Tapachula with Todd Binsman, there was no talk of cartels being there. There's criminal groups, but not cartels as it is now, where they've made their inroads and fighting for the routes and for the migrants. And just about every other state in central Mexico is infighting over with the drug cartels. So it is a lot of insecurity, and I think this is another thing that we're not seeing yet, as far as the executive order, but from President Trump declaring drug cartels as terrorist organizations. So just imagine if the U.S. was to intervene, and now instead of infighting between cartels, now you have U.S. forces fighting along. What that's going to create is even more insecurity and even more reason for Mexico nationals to come to the U.S. seeking asylum or refugee. They're fleeing the violence in Mexico, which some are already doing, and some were using CBP-1. But now it could happen where it's escalated, and I don't think we've envisioned that yet or see it play out, but it's a possibility.
What about the tourist areas like Cabo, Cancun? I mean, have they worked their way into all that too?
Yeah, they're in there. So anything that can be, any business that can be bribed and extorted, they're in there. We've heard of the lime industry, the avocado industry, tourism. They're everywhere. If they can't make enough money off of drugs, immigrants, they're going to go into every legit business in Mexico. And that's just life in Mexico for now.
Is it to a point like in those places that you wouldn't recommend for tourists to go, or is it one, or do they say, don't mess with the tourists?
Both. So you can still go to these tourist areas and
like Rocky Point or
stay within populated areas. For the most part, things are happening out in the outskirts, but every once in a while, they make it into the main areas, main nightclubs, main restaurants. So it's just one of those where, if you're not into doing anything illegal, you should be good. And, just always watch your back, but stay vigilant. But again, why take that risk? I think that's something that Mexico is missing out on. Again, because it's become so widespread. It reminds me of a saying that my dad would always tell me growing up. It's like, Mexico is a rich, poor country. It's very rich. It has a lot of potential, but just I call it the DNA of the Mexican. It's corrupt, and they have no intention of making Mexico great, making Mexico safe. And heck, you have the United States, the greatest country in the world, as your neighbor. You should be the second greatest. And they're not taking advantage of that opportunity. I just don't understand it. And now, now I see what my dad was talking about.
How does that change? Or I mean, at some point, do you see some type of major unrest between the cartels and the people, or the people just don't have the strength to do that?
I think that people need a leader, somebody that will inspire them to rise up. Nobody's willing to do it. They're outnumbered by corruption because it's everywhere. It's not just the drug cartels, it's politicians, it's all types of law enforcement at every level. Everyone is paid out, bribed, corrupt, and the people know it. It's like that. That's why there's no uprising. There's a conservative movement that's taking rise in Mexico, and like I said, this is a great opportunity for President Trump to take advantage of that and make changes in Mexico as well. Not just here in the U.S., but there's a lot of opportunity to use Mexico and even the people that are here in the U.S., as opposed to making them turn against the administration or turn against, as you hear it, turn against the gringo. There's many reasons to be allies and friends and look for ways to work together. But right now, as it is, like I said, with the build the wall and Mexico will pay for it. A lot of people in Mexico turn sour against President Trump. He was ridiculed, and now with the leftist president in Mexico and what President Trump has done so far in these 2 days, he's going down the same road, and I think it should be completely different if we really want to see permanent changes. Even with the immigration issue, just about every post that I post, on X, everybody's talking about, it's Mexico's fault, blame it on Mexico, and Mexico this, Mexico that, and it's yes and no. Mexico did play a big part in it, but it goes beyond Mexico. Every country had a role in this. The UN had a big role in it. NGOs had a big role, and I think that's what is not being addressed yet. The whole focus is on Mexico, and I think it should go beyond Mexico.
So what are you working on now?
I just monitor what's happening at the border and in Mexico, and try to see things from the migrants' perspective. Right now, we have approximately 250,000 migrants stuck in Mexico that were in Tapachula or throughout Mexico, waiting for their CBP-1 appointment.
Why did they wait so long? Not to interrupt you. Why did they wait so long? I saw it was sarcastically. They said if you had 4 years and you wait till the last 20 minutes to get in.
So for the first 3 years of the Biden administration, they were all showing en masse at the border and crossing illegally, and then claiming asylum on the U.S. side. And that was a major black eye for the Biden administration because, we were there, Fox News and all the media that was reporting on all these mass crossings at the border. I think that was a major black eye for the Biden administration. So what they did, that's when they implemented, the CBP-1 and other programs to encourage migrants to enter through the legal pathway. That way, those numbers would not get reflected on the CBP, illegal encounters. And I think that's what took too long for the Biden administration to implement, and for the migrants to kind of get a hold of the messaging, saying, oh, they don't want us to go and cross illegally, they want us to use this app. And it created that bottleneck in Mexico. And that's what the majority were doing. They're doing, their appointment, and time just ran out on them. And like I was saying, at least 30,000 appointments that had already been confirmed, they got canceled, and approximately 250,000 migrants stuck in Mexico now that were applying through CBP-1. And so now it's Mexico's trying to help them out so they can get refugee status in Mexico, or they're also issuing a goodwill card with 2,000 pesos, approximately $100, so they can go back to the country of origin or wherever they want to go. But with remaining in Mexico, like I said, some of them are just going to wait it out in Mexico and wait out until Trump leaves, and hoping that another Democrat comes in and opens up the border again, or there's asylum laws, any hope. They're grasping for any hope that they can make it into the U.S. And I think as long as that hope is alive, we're going to have this problem. It's just going to keep coming.
So they'll wait it out for 4 years?
They'll wait it out even longer. Their intent is to be in the U.S., especially those that have already been here and have been deported. They know this is better here, so they'll wait it out as long as they have to. And I think that's what a lot of politicians are not grasping, the will and the intent of the migrant. that as long as there's some sliver of hope, they're going to wait it out. So, and that's why I'm more for having permanent solutions as opposed to these temporary executive orders or policy changes.
Do you think the United States would declare some type of war or take some type of military action against the cartels? And if they did, how would you see that playing out?
So I don't see it playing out as war as we know it.
Kinetic? You
Because
don't see it going hot?
no, cartels are not. What's the word? So they're not organized. They're not in one specific place. They're out and about in towns, cities, in the mountains. For one, it'd be hard to confront them because they're not all in one place, and it's just not one cartel. It's many of them. So I don't see how this is going to play out as far as I see it more as special units being sent and target specific cartel leaders, but not full war with these cartels. And if it were to happen like that, I think they would all band together, and it would be very messy if they were to all band together, and we had a little war between U.S. and Mexican cartels.
That would happen on U.S. soil, I would believe, right? From a guerrilla style standpoint.
Yeah, guerrilla style. And if it happens on Mexican territory, I think Mexico may have the upper hand, and I don't think the U.S. is prepared for that. Because these people, again, they're, I think they'll put everything on the line for their patriotism in Mexico, and they'll band together, and I don't think it's going to be a pretty sight.
Well, and people don't understand either is the cartel members that are here in the United States, and they're amongst the community, right? They have kids that go to the schools, participate in the sports, and have you.
Exactly. So now, you have some here in the U.S. and the vast majority in Mexico, and yeah, I don't see it playing out as many do. With the U.S. going in and attacking these cartels.
What about, are you finding the amount of children that are coming in right now, has that slowed down in the recent days?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much completely shut down as far as any crossings, illegal crossings. I had been reporting after November 5th when Trump won, that I was expecting a rush there at the border, especially there in Piedras Negras and Eagle Pass, and some of it did play out, with all the caravans leaving Tapachula and Mexican immigration handing out these humanitarian visas for 20 days that, they've used that tool. And that's what that's why they go and protest as a caravan, because they want these transit visas so they can go to the U.S. Mexico border. And Mexico was granting them 20 days. And they would say it's 20 days to get out of the country, but they didn't say whether it was southern Mexico or northern Mexico. And of course, the migrants were using it to go and travel to the U.S. Mexico border. And that's how some were arriving there in Piedras Negras, still using the train and crossing. They didn't arrive en masse, and that's because of that one tactic that I've talked about, and Todd Bensman has talked about, the ant operation, where the caravans are broken up, disintegrated, and they use it with this multiple migration form, this 20-day transit visa that pretty much breaks up the caravans, and they all arrive, at their own pace, at different timing, at different ports of entry. And since the train leads directly to Piedras Negras, that's one of the border towns. That's where some were arriving and crossing these final days. But now it's completely over. So now they're stuck in Mexico and trying to figure out what to do next.
What what is your sense then for 2025? How do you feel about where we're at? Where do you think this is all going in the short term for this year?
For this year, I think the Trump administration is going to try and say, promises made, promises kept, and they'll do the raids and deport some, and but I don't see it playing out as a lot of people think it's going to play out with these, like I said, these mass deportations. Um, I don't know where they're going to get all the people from, how they're going to get them, where they're going to place them, and then how they're going to get deported, whether it's, at ports of entry towards Mexico or on flights to their country of origin or some other country. So this first year, I think even these first days and weeks, perhaps months, they're going to be scrambling to do, what they promised, mass raids and mass deportations. But I think further down, it'll play out more in the courts. I think it'll be a lot of battles in the courts, in Congress. That's what I'm foreseeing, that a lot of them will lawyer up. A lot of the migrants, they'll lawyer up. They're going to sue the administration, which we're already seeing some of that. And whether the fight is going to be in the courts or in the streets, the fight's going to happen. They're not going to go freely and easily to their country of origin.
Will the NGOs disappear?
So that a lot of people were pushing to defund them. I know the funding will probably dry up unless the Trump administration decides to use them now to, instead of help, how they did help the migrants into the country, now they're going to help to get them out of the country. But for the most part, I see the sentiment turned against NGOs where, people don't want any more funding going to them. I think for the most part, some will shut down unless they're getting funding from, from the UN or some big organization. They'll probably continue operating, but the small ones, I think those will dry up.
Where can people find you, Auden?
So I'm mainly posting on X. That's where I post everything related to the border, related to migrants in Mexico. I focus more on the Mexican side. There's plenty of journalists covering the border crisis here in the U.S. So I try to get it from a different perspective, different angle. So I focus more from the Mexican side, and I post directly on X, very randomly on Instagram or Facebook. But yeah, I'm on X, and that's where people can find me.
Don't talk about Bitcoin on X. Don't talk about the Trump meme coin on X, because you'll get put in the timeout like I did yesterday. Unbelievable. I was just saying to somebody, because I got put on a 7-day suspension for YouTube for talking about the medical. You can't say the friendly virus or the solution to the virus. And as a kid, these R-rated movie was on regular TV. They would have to bleep out all the swear words, right? Or they would either do a lousy voiceover. This is in the 80s. So they'd do like a lousy voiceover, or they would just mute it. YouTube, I could say every probably profanity word I want. I could use derogatory about women, racial. I could say it all on there. But I can't say about the friendly virus in 2020 and the solution to that. You can't say those words. And apparently you can't say, I can't put a clip about Bitcoin or Trump meme coins on X either. And I get put in a timeout.
Oh, wow.
What a world we live in, Auden. I mean,
yeah. Well, as far as the border, I keep it commonsensical. I compare what politicians are saying versus, what's happening on the ground. And hopefully, if we have to get critical of Trump or his administration and what they're doing, hopefully we don't get censored or, on X, because that's where I've been posting everything. But I keep it real, regardless of, who's in office and what politicians are saying. I think that's what people deserve. They want the facts of what's happening on the ground. And I try to keep it as real as possible. And like I said, hopefully we don't get censored on X.
Yeah, one last thing. What will the people do about that Mexican president? I mean, do they like her? I don't want to assume that they hate her, but I mean, how do they feel about?
So they do like her. I know Lopez Obrador was very popular, and Claudia Sheinbaum is an extension of Lopez Obrador. And, she's been standing up to President Trump so far. And for the most part, that's favorable. They like it in Mexico that she's standing up her ground, fighting for the Mexicans. And but like I said, there is a rising movement, a conservative movement in Mexico, and they're concerned that she's aligning herself with dictators, with Venezuela, with Cuba, Nicaragua, and they're concerned that because of her, the U.S. will punish Mexico, and everybody will get punished, every Mexican, because of her. So there is some concern, but for the most part, she is somewhat, favorable. So we'll see where that goes.
Will there ever be a political movement that'll be strong enough to overtake the cartels, or is at this point, the way you see it, they just have too tight a grip?
Right now, it's too tight. They're everywhere. I mean, under previous administrations, they were all the way up to the president. So, it's going to be very hard, and I think it's a good focus. It's something to focus for the U.S. to try to overturn that, because the regular citizens in Mexico, they want somebody to come, they want a savior. They want somebody to help and come over and listen to them and help them and get them out of that grind, because everybody's paying for it, and they just gotten used to that lifestyle, and their hopes is that somebody comes and helps them. So even declaring cartels as terrorist organizations, I think over 50% of Mexican nationals were in favor of it. So that's a good sign, but I think how it gets implemented or deployed, I think it's going to be very critical. Not to make things worse, but in the long term, hopefully, it's something good for Mexican nationals that are, that love their country and looking for ways to support their families, and they're not looking for ways to flee to the U.S. like other countries. They want to stay their ground in Mexico and fight for their country.
Well, and I think that's where people, they don't have an understanding when you're dealing with cartels. I mean, you're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations and the weaponry that they have. I mean, fair to say it's similar, if not the same as the military here. I mean, they have drones, right? They have access to, I mean, I don't know, missiles. What?
Yeah, they have. They have a lot of weapons. It's not the old cartels of back then where they had small guns. Now they're very, very well equipped, very armed, and they're going to put up a fight. They're not going to leave those weapons there just sitting there. They're going to use them, and that's concerning.
Auden, as always, thanks for coming back on, and look forward to more conversations ahead, continuing to follow your work, and I don't know where this is all going to go, but it's going to be entertaining. There's going to be a lot of opportunities both for what you're doing and what I'm doing. So I'm thankful that you came back and talked to me.
Absolutely. Anytime. Good seeing you.
You too. Mic drop.